That's Charlton Heston as Moses in the Ten Commandments. And I saw that movie when I was a kid. It was long. Oh my gosh, so long. It's like 9 hours. Oh, it's crazy long. But it was confusing, a lot of confusing parts to it because, there's the dramatic moment where he goes before Pharaoh and says, let my people go. And then he splits the Red Sea with a staff. It's that big movie moment. And it gets a little strange because he gets in a fight with all these talking apes. And then the apes take him prisoner. And it's just kind of weird. It's like a long, just weird movie. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized that maybe I was watching a marathon or something, but what I thought was one long movie is actually two different, distinct movies because Charlton Heston is in both the Ten Commandments and Planet of the Apes. So I thought, man, Exodus is weird. It gets screwy. It's just weird. So I feel like if we're going to teach the book of Exodus and help everyone get clarity, maybe someone out here, this happened to you. So I feel like it's important for all of us to understand that the Ten Commandments and Planet of the Apes are two completely different movies, okay? So if that helped, maybe that's the one thing you needed. That was the one thing you needed. Like, I can walk off now. That was it. That's what I needed to hear. But that'll give you a little clarity about the book of Exodus. Now, last time we were in Exodus, Pastor Craig masterfully summarized hundreds of years of history to start off this book and kind of what leads into the story of Exodus. And he talked about how God has a plan, and his plan never fails. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick right back up into the story of Moses right where he left off. Where we left Moses, in an attempt to rescue his people, kind of out of that desire, he kills an Egyptian, and now he's on the run. So he's a fugitive wanted for murder. That's how all, great ministry stories start, right? So he's on the run, and let me kind of tell you what happens to kind of catch you up to speed. So he's on the run, and he rests at a well. And while he's at that well, some daughters of a priest come by, and they're trying to get water for their animals, and they get harassed and chased off by some group of shepherds. So Moses sees this happen. He gets up, decides to be the hero, and he chases off these shepherds and helps these ladies water their animals. And then what happens is they go and they tell their father, the priest, what happened. And he's like, well, why didn't you bring him back? Go get him, invite him for dinner. So they go get him, they invite him for dinner. And what happens is Moses ends up staying with his family for the next 40 years. He marries one of the daughters. He ends up having a child, so he ends up becoming part of this family. One divine event leads to the next 40 years. So what's going to happen is we're going to move ahead 40 years in his life. And what's interesting is Pastor Craig said last week that Moses was 40 years too soon. He was called to save his people, but he was too brash. He was not mature enough to do it. So what happens is God puts him in Midian with this family for 40 years to mature him, to develop him. Because last week, Moses was the right guy at the wrong time. But now it's finally, as we speed up 40 years, it's finally the right time. And why has this happened? And we're going to look at our first passage here. It says Exodus 2, 23 through 25. In your outline, it says, years passed, and the king of Egypt died. That's important because the king of Egypt wanted him dead because he had murdered an Egyptian. So all these folks are passing away. The times are changing. But the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel and knew it's time to act. And what I get from this passage, I think it's very important to note, is that God hears our groaning. God hears that internal groaning, that discontent, that those times when life is so difficult and you're just trying to get up every day and just face each day. Maybe you're going through just a really rough season, and I want you to know that God hears our groaning. Sometimes you pray, you do everything, you go to church, they tell you 3 things to try to do, and you go try all that, and you get nothing in response from God. If you've never had one of those silent seasons where you're going through something and it feels like God's not there, it's a hard season. But I want you to know that God knows every piece of your situation. and soon he will act. The Bible says that God knows, in fact, it says that he knows and has logged down every tear that we cry. And at the right time, he will move on our behalf. You can always rely on God that he will respond. It may not be in our timing. It may not be how we would do it. All those kind of things. We don't know how he will act. We don't know what he'll do. He is God. But he will always respond to the cries of his people. And so what happens is we pick back up in Exodus 3:1. We get back to Moses here. Because now it's finally the right time. And pick up verse 1. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt. Now here we see that Moses is leading flocks. It's one fox. He's just leading one fox. Just like, come on, little guy, let's go. Anyway, no, flocks of sheep. That's all he's been doing for 40 years. Just leading flocks of sheep. It's like, I'm calling you to do something amazing, Moses, and then 40 years of sheep tending. But what's interesting is God is using him leading these flocks of sheep because he's going to lead a flock of 1 million people out of Egypt. And isn't it weird how God uses those little things in our life that we think are meaningless to start bringing us to the next level? And so it's an interesting thing because Moses sees a fire within a bush, and the bush doesn't burn up. It just stays there. And so there's just this fire that's raging, but nothing's happening. And then God speaks to him out of that fire and tells him, you're going to go to Pharaoh. You're going to tell him to let the Israelites go. You're going to lead my people out of Egypt. This is an interesting proposition going on here. And one time I heard a pastor say this, I thought it was a very interesting question about the burning bush. What does God have to burn to get your attention? If God is going to bring you on focus, is something going to end up in flames? What's going to have to burn for God to get your attention? That's just something to think about, a little food for thought, a little uncomfortable question as we kind of think through this. I want to start off at verse 11. Let's keep reading. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what's interesting right here, because I love this, because Moses is going, okay, but God, who am I to go before? Who am I to do all these things? And then God goes, no, Moses, you don't get it. It's because I am. This is not about who you are. This is not about, you're focused on who you are. And listen, this is about who I am. Because I am the great I am. And this is what's interesting. He says, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go. And then what this is doing, this is setting up next week. Because there's about to be a showdown that's about to go down. Because if Moses does this, Pharaoh is not going to let go of all the slave labor of his country, okay? That's not something like, we don't need them. It's fine, take them. We don't need to build anything. We don't need infrastructure. We don't need any of that kind of stuff. Just take them. It's fine. No, Moses is going to do everything. Pharaoh, he's going to do everything in his power not to let these people go. But God is about to show off his power in a big, dramatic showdown next week. So all this that God has said he's going to do, which is pretty dramatic, right? You read and go, man, this is, wow. I mean, can you imagine if God spoke to you and promised that he would do all these kind of things? And Moses is struggling. He's really struggling with what God is telling him. And this is what happens. Chapter 4, verse 1. But Moses protested again, well, what if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? Then the Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Now I'm going to pause right there, and I'm actually going to fast forward through this chapter because there's some really cool things that happen. I want to talk about this, but I think this is interesting that Moses asked him, he's like, what's going to make anyone listen to me? And God says, what's in your hand? He has a staff. That staff, he's a shepherd. Remember that. His staff represents his career. It represents his skills. It represents his talents, his abilities. And it's an interesting thing because he says, okay, what have I given you, Moses? What am I going to do? What am I going to do to make people listen? What have I given you? I've given you these skills. I've given you these abilities. And then he says, take this staff and lay it down before me. And what happens in the story is Moses takes the staff and he lays it down on the floor. And as soon as he does, the staff turns into a snake. And then God tells him, grab the tail of the snake again, which I'd be like, no. You can turn it into a snake. You can turn it into a staff yourself, okay? Because I'm not grabbing that. But he tells him, good. So Moses, out of fear, grabs down and grabs the tail of the snake. And as he lifts the snake up, it extends back out, turns back into the staff, which is pretty awesome. I mean, man, if I could do that, I'd be doing that all the time. I'd be running around, check out the stick, and throwing it everywhere. I'd be like, that's all I would do, right? But what's so interesting about this is that God shows Moses he can do anything with literally anything. I can do anything with literally anything. The staff is going to do something that you didn't even know it could do if you lay it down before me. And what's interesting about this is, what's in your hand that needs to be laid down before God? Every one of us have talents, skills, abilities, a career, things that we pursue, things that we're good at. But do you know the power of what God can do through that if you lay it down before him? The interesting thing is you can make a living using your skills and talents, and that's true. But you can make an impact when you lay those skills and talents before God and say, what do you want me to do? Oh, that's not enough. Come on, we got to have a little bit more than that. Because I'm going to tell you, the thing is, and this is what's so critical, the staff represents what he can do. And for so many of us, you've never seen the extent of what you can do until God does something through you. So God shows him 3 miracles, okay? So let me just fast forward what happens. So obviously, he throws down the staff, it turns into a snake, he picks it back up, it comes back up again. And God says, in case you need a second miracle, he says, put your hand in your cloak. So Moses puts his hand in his cloak, and then when he pulls it out, it's white and diseased. And then he says, put your hand back in your cloak. So he puts it back in, pulls that out, and it's healthy again. And then God tells him, in case you need a third miracle, pour water out on the ground. Take water from the Nile and pour it on the ground, it'll turn to blood. I mean, at this point, I'd be a Vegas act. I'd be like, I have no problem doing this. Because I've always wanted to do, I'd be like, boom, boom. I'd just do all kinds of, at this point, I feel like, the magic lover in me would be like, this is the most amazing thing. I can do all these things, and it's God doing it. It's not an illusion. It's not, but Moses can do all these kind of things. God is showing him, he literally shows him miracles to his face. And here's what's interesting. God provides Moses with miracles, and he responds with excuses. Is there anybody in here that's had that happen to you, that God's done miracles in your life, and your response is, yeah, but come on. Let's get serious. Not me. choose somebody else. In fact, I'll write a bunch of names down, and I'll send them to you, and then you pick one of those names, okay? I know you've done amazing things in my life, but let's just stop here. So this is what's interesting. Exodus 4:10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh, Lord, I'm not very good with words. I've never been, and I'm not now, even though you've spoken to me. I get tongue-tied. I say fox instead of flock. And was that not in there? Sorry. Anyways, and my words get tangled." And then the Lord asked Moses, "Hey, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord?" That's my favorite answer to a question ever. But God, you know I'm not good with words. Oh, okay. Who makes mouths, Moses? Who makes mouths? I can make anyone see, hear, or speak if I want them to, and I can shut them up if I want them to. And you're coming at me going, but I don't know. Come on, man. Like, are you serious? This is what's so interesting. Moses keeps saying, but who am I? But who am I? And God keeps saying, Moses, I am. I am who I am. Have you forgotten? But God, I can't. God says, Moses, you will. You will. You know what's interesting? Sometimes the only obstacles that stand in front of our destiny are excuses. There's nothing else that's standing in your way. Oh, I'm just waiting on the right circumstance. Oh, well, if this happens, then I'll do it. Or if this person does this, then I'll do it. And you keep waiting on all these right situations when all it is that you don't need God to set the plate. The honest truth is you look in the mirror and say, I'm afraid. That's what's really going on. It's not the circumstances. It's pure fear of like, I don't know if I can do this. And we say these things to God, but God, I'm inadequate. I'm incapable. I'm insignificant. I'm incompetent. And God looks at us and says, but if you're in me, then you can take the "in" off all those words. Because you are more than adequate. You are more than capable. You are more than significant. You are more than competent. Because it's not you. I'm going to move through you. That's what I'm going to do. Well, God, I can't do all this. You're right. But God can do whatever he wants through whoever he chooses. And that's the thing. Finally and sadly, last verse, Moses just tries to opt out altogether. But Moses again pleaded, Lord, please send anyone else. What a frustrating conversation that was. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, God has just done all these things. I mean, I'm telling you, I've never had a conversation with God where God's like, throw your pen down, boom, you know, like, throw this book in there, boom, and all this stuff, and all these things happen. And in the end, I'm like, yeah, but just pick somebody else, okay? It's not you, it's me, you know, that's all right. I'm just not ready. This has to be so frustrating can you imagine? But we have this conversation with God all the time. God works and does things in our life, and you have those moments where you know it's only God. This person's still alive. Oh my God, it is only God. All these things happen, and then he wants to do a work in you, and we're like, oh, no. Some of you, that's why you don't pray. Because you don't want to hear what he has to say. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to know that he's calling you into something. You don't want to do that. But you know what's interesting about this? God says, fine, Moses, your brother Aaron, he's going to go with you. And he's going to speak with you. But I love this. He says, your brother's going to hold your hand, but you better make sure in your other hand you've got that staff. Because I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do through you. And it's just this awesome way, that this part, I'm going to stop right there because we just blazed through 2 chapters of Exodus there. But it's just interesting because I think for a lot of us, God has been calling some of us, knocking on the doors of our hearts and our minds, pointing towards something. And our answer is a really super spiritual no. It's real spiritual, though. You know, I have 4 kids. That's a lot of kids. Okay, it's just a lot. For those of you at 3, just, tone it down. All right, it's fine. But I have 4 kids, and we'll ride in the car, and they'll start doing knock-knock jokes, right? And it's fine with like one person doing it, but when all 4 of them start doing it, I mean, it goes on for like 20 minutes. Knock-knock, who's there? And the jokes just get, dumber and dumber and dumber. They just get worse. Well, it's not even a joke. It's just saying stuff, so they're just trying stuff out, and so knock-knock, who's there? And so they'll know when Carrie and I are getting tired of the knock-knock jokes because we change our response. Because they'll be like, knock-knock, and we'll say, nobody's home. Knock-knock, we're not here. And they get really frustrated. No, really, knock-knock. And I'm like, nobody's home. We've had 20 minutes of knock-knock jokes. There's not even that many knock-knock jokes, okay? We've reached our limit. But you know what's interesting is some of us are playing that game with God. Knock-knock, nobody's home. Not coming. Nobody's here. You're at the wrong house. He is knocking. And we say, I'm not the one. It's not me. Don't give me this idea. Don't give me this vision. Don't put this desire in me because you know it's not me. And God says, it's not you, it is me. It's not who you are. I am who I am. And I will do it through you. Let me tell you a fact that you can bet your life on. If God calls you to it, then you know He will do it. That's going to happen. If God calls you to it, you can have total faith and trust that He's going to make it happen. Now, I'm not promising you an easy ride. I'm not saying, if you give your life to Christ, everything's comfort and convenience from now on. Nope. But He will do what He says He's going to do. Some of you think, if God is calling you to something, listen, if God has put something inside of you, He doesn't need your help. He's not up there in heaven going like, well, we need an expert. Let's pick Larry over here. He'll help us. He doesn't need your help. But you know what the whole thing is? God wants to move lives to Him. And so all He's wanting to do is start by moving you first. He's going to use you to impact other people. But He's going to draw you to Him closer than you've ever been first. And that's the thing is, I love this passage. I want you to put this passage somewhere. This is a great one. 1 Thessalonians 5:24. It says, the one who calls you is faithful, and He will do it. He will do it. Some of you have been saying, I can't do it. And you're right, because He will do it. He will do it. But He calls you to be a part of His plan. And we get ourselves all worked up. Listen, let me just be honest with you. God is not going to lead you somewhere and leave you hanging. Okay? He's not going to call you and then put you in Africa, and all of a sudden you're stuck in Africa. And you're like, oh, God left me where I'm in Africa now. So many people are like, I don't want to give up to the call of God. I don't want to do what God tells me to do because then I'm either going to be a pastor. Those guys are weird, right? All the pastors I knew growing up were weird. They all call me brother. Like, I'm not your brother, bro. Quit calling me that. Pastors, or they think you're going to be a pastor, or they think you're going to go sit to a foreign country somewhere. Oh, if I get good, I'm going to end up in the jungle somewhere, and I'm going to get hunted down. Oh, God. Listen, did you know that there are more jobs than that in the world? Those are not the only 2 jobs in the world. That doesn't mean what you think it means, but listen, you got to look at this and realize the fact that you don't think you can do anything about it. You don't think you can move it, but God says, I will be your strength. You don't think you can say it, but God says, I will be your voice. You don't think you have what it takes, but God says, I have everything you need. If God could put a fire in a bush, He can put a fire within you. And what Moses was looking at, what I love, it's one of my favorite pictures in all of Scripture. I love that I got this week. Because my favorite picture is Moses in the dark of night staring at that fire. Because what God was showing him was a picture of what he's going to do in him. I'm going to put a burning in your heart. I'm going to put a calling in you. A burning discontent in you, Moses. And there's that picture. I love it. The man in the night standing in front of that flame, deciding what he's going to do about it. And I think there's a crossroads moment for everybody at some point in your life when God clearly says, this is what I want you to do. And you've got to stand and stare at that flame and say, what am I going to do? Because here's what's true with God. You can run, but you cannot hide. Jonah tried to do it like an idiot, and then God swarmed him up in a whale and threw him up back on the beach and said, try again. I am who I am. I made your mouth. I made everything about you. I will get you to Nineveh one way or the other. And it's just such an interesting picture. Because you know what's true about that burning within us? It doesn't stop. See, some of you have what I call a holy discontent. You see something and you don't like what it is, and you wish that someone would change it, and you wish that someone would fix it, and you wish that someone would just see what you see. But the truth is that God is like, yeah, about that person, I'm going to call you to it. And that burning discontent never goes away. That desire never goes away. Some of you have a fire within, and you need to listen to it. When I was 17 years old, I was on Panama City Beach. No applause, that's what I thought. Anyway, and I'm in Florida. But I was on Panama City Beach at my last beach camp as I was in youth group, and I was watching all my friends, and they were all laughing about how stupid this camp was and blowing off everything and talking about girls doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting over there with my Bible. Now, by the way, I wasn't supposed to be on the beach. I'd already broken the rules, okay, because that's kind of still a rule breaker, kind of thing. They're like, don't go to the beach. And I'm like, yeah, but I have my Bible, so it's cool. Anyway, so I'm sitting there like trying to figure out what God is saying to me because something's going on. There's this burning, there's this moment, there's this thing. And then I see my friends, and they're all like hiding out doing what they're not supposed to be doing either. And I'm like, why is it that I'm wrestling with this and they're not? They're okay with just coming here and looking at chicks and just not doing anything. They don't care. They don't care. And why do I care? I was just like them like a few months ago. And why do I even care about any of this? Why am I sitting out here with the Bible? What's wrong with me? Why? And I said to him, I was like, God, why don't you just clearly tell them what you told me? Why don't you just talk to them? Why don't we get rid of our goofy camp speaker that we don't even like and bring in somebody good who's going to speak into them and charge them and do this kind of stuff? When are you going to just get someone to do that and clearly speak to this generation? And God's like, yeah, about that. And that's how I got called in. I was like, well, no, not me. I was talking about somebody else. Oh, man, don't be lazy. Like, think about it and pick somebody. Don't just pick the first complainer and be like, oh. I'll tell you, man, 17 years old. I went to my pastor. I told him about the beach, and he said, you have a calling. And I was like, well, no one called me. It's like God didn't dial my phone and be like, hey, listen, it's me. No, it didn't happen that way. But I'm telling you, ever since, it was that discontent, and God said, you see what you feel, you see that you see that in you. That's what I'm going to use to do more than you ever thought I could ever do. You're going to meet people you never would meet had you not followed me. You're going to go places you would never have gone had you not followed me. And I look back, and it was one of those crucial moments where I stared into the flame, and I had to decide, am I going to embrace my destiny, or am I going to chicken out and just play it safe? For some of you, you've been hearing this voice inside for a long time. And you have every excuse of why to never surrender your life to Christ. You have so many great reasons and excuses. But not only do you know that God is real, but you know that he speaks to you and it bothers you. And the thing that you need to realize is just like the staff of Moses, nothing's going to change until you lay it down before God. nothing's going to really change in your life until you lay it down before God and say, I am yours. There's a fire within so many of us, and our response has simply been excuses of why it's not the right time and I'm not the right person. And you have made an amazing case of why this is not the right time and you're not the right person. But let me tell you, God says you've made your case, but don't you ever forget that I made you, and I know the future. And I'm calling you into the very reason you were born. And there's a probable chance, if you keep making excuses, you will come to a season in your life when it's too late. And you will look back on your life and realize you regret not living out the very purpose of why you were here. You played it safe. And no one celebrates playing it safe. You don't ever go to a funeral where everyone's like, yep, nothing happened. What an accomplishment. This person chickened out of every great thing. No, you don't hear that. We celebrate the people who were brave enough to look in the flame and embrace something greater than them. The thing is, if he calls you to it, he's going to do it. Some of you are called to serve. You filled out 300 volunteer cards in the last year and you've not returned one call. You filled it out, you got all inspired in that moment, and then all of a sudden you became a fugitive on the run from the law, and every time the church calls you, they can't get a hold of you, and you start acting, oh, this is the wrong number, this is so-and-so, and then you're doing all this kind of stuff to dodge it. I didn't mean that I want to serve in children's, I just meant that I just want to tell the church how children are great. Some of you, we're entering a new season of ministry. We're about to head into the fall and a brand new semester of ministry. And some of you know that you're supposed to be serving, but you keep making reasons. You don't want to let God use your life in that kind of way because you don't think he can. And I'm telling you that there are kids that will be mentored. There are people's lives that will be changed. There are powerful things waiting to happen. If you will just look in the flame and go, okay, I'll go. And respond to the call, by the way, when they call you. That's kind of critical. Some of you are called to start something. I don't know what it is, but you've had an idea and you've had a vision and you keep putting it off and you keep waiting for the right this and the right that. And in this moment, God says, no, go. It needs to start. It's time to start it now. For some of you, God's calling you to lead. There's a leadership void that you keep complaining about. Oh, I just wish someone would step up. Man, somebody needs to step up and do this. And God's like, yeah, waiting on you. I'll call you to it, and I'll do it. But I'm not going to force you. Step into it. For some of you, God's calling just to act. There's something that you need to do. For some of you, you need to go. There's a place or there's something that you've been called and you know, like, oh, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to go to that place. I'm scared about what might happen. Whatever it is that God's calling you to do, think about this. What will happen if you answer? What will happen if you don't? Will you regret it? Will you look back and go, that was the moment, and I didn't do it? Let me tell you, may we not be fearful, because the one who calls us is faithful. Faithful every time. He will not lead you to somewhere that he's going to leave you. He will do it. Do you trust him enough to listen to the fire within and answer the call? Let's pray. God, I first of all lift up people who have been struggling with the voice inside calling their name to surrender, to give their lives to Christ. And I pray that they won't leave where they are without praying with someone. But even more than that, I pray that they'll just pray and give their lives to Him and say, God, I believe in everything You've done for me through Jesus Christ. I believe it was for me. Please take my sins away from me and lead me from now on. You are the Lord of my life. I also pray for believers who struggle with belief. I pray for Christians who struggle with the power of Christ. I pray for those of us who know that we're called to be on mission, but we struggle with our mission. Pray for all of us who know You have been flashing something at us. You've been showing us. The light has been going off, and we know that there's this one thing that You keep calling us toward. You keep pulling us toward. But we're so afraid. But God, we believe and we know that if You would call us to it, we know that we can trust You to do it. You are faithful. The one who calls us is faithful. And God, I pray for every person who steps out in faith that You will show Your faithfulness to them. Show them that You will be with them every step of the way. It's not going to be a joy ride, but it's the only ride worth taking. Help us to trust You. In Jesus' name, amen.